What's up, y'all? Reggie here, the fitness tutor, coming at you with another video. As I record this video, it is April 5th, 2020. We're in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic and subsequent, at least in my area, in America, quarantine, social distancing, shutdowns, etc., etc. So a lot of us are cooped up. People are getting out, taking more walks. Now, I've always been a big proponent of getting out, taking walks and stuff, and exercising outside. But a lot of people are getting out more, trying to get more vitamin D, getting out of the house, etc., etc. So I figured it was a good time to start back talking about vitamin D and get these videos going. So I'll preface this by saying I'm currently getting over what we assume was the flu. I had about at the beginning of March, and I developed bronchitis after that. And you'll probably hear me cough here during this video, but hopefully it's not corona. And there's a chance that it could be because I wasn't tested. So anyway, vitamin D is very important when it comes to our immune system. So it's always a topic that kind of comes up, but I've always been interested in vitamin D, as I stated in my first video, because when I first found out that we make an important vitamin from our skin being in sunlight, it was just really interesting to me. And I was like, hey, it's kind of like photosynthesis, but we actually need the sunlight for the most part. We obviously need the sunlight, but it's becoming more and more apparent that we need more appropriate sun exposure. Now, as the saying goes, the difference between a medicine and a poison is in the dose. So again, you have to try to balance how much sunlight you're getting, and that sunlight needs to be appropriate, which is what I want to talk about in this overview. So vitamin D, the sunshine vitamin, as we call it, is not really a vitamin. As a retraction to my first video, I said that it was a hormone. A lot of experts say that, but that's coming into question. Doesn't really fit technically that definition. It is a precursor to the active form and the final form of the quote-unquote vitamin. So I think in a clinical standpoint, a lot of people, it's kind of up in debate what it should be called. And a lot of people just call it your 25 hydroxy levels in your blood. So, and what we make in our skin is not our active vitamin D3, which you need the liver, then the kidneys to make the final active form, which is 25 hydroxy. So a lot of people just call it 25 hydroxy here and there, or if you read, it's kind of used interchangeably. So it's important to understand that this is becoming, it's becoming more and more apparent that we use vitamin D kind of all the time to help in a lot of cellular functions, and all of our nuclei or whatever have receptor sites for vitamin D. And from what I understand, is that they act like these receptor sites help give access to the nucleus. So anytime your body needs to replicate something, an organelle, immunoglobulin, something that we need that genetic material for, we tend to access the nucleus in some cases. We have some of this out in the cell, but we're becoming more and more aware that our nucleus just doesn't sit there in the cell waiting for cell division or whatever, or waiting to divide and do that whole thing. So our nucleus is a little more active than we first thought. And obviously the chromosome that's where the chromosomes are, and the chromosome is your genetic material, and that's kind of the name of the game and the protection of our chief protection of life, is getting your DNA into the future. So you want to protect that and that access, but we also use that to keep ourselves and keep ourselves, CELLS, and to keep ourselves healthy. So if you don't have enough people to open the doors to this place, you don't get as much and as efficient access. And it's obvious that vitamin D plays an important role when it comes to the absorption of calcium, because if you don't get enough vitamin D, you develop rickets, and then you have bone diseases, brittle bones, weak bones, malformed bones, stunted growth, etc., etc. And you know, during the Industrial Revolution, we started building bigger and taller buildings and housing. You know, the kids would go outside and play, and it could be pretty much, you know, kind of midday, but if you look up and the sun wasn't overhead, you know, these kids wasn't getting much, wasn't absorbing much calcium, wasn't getting much sunlight. So they would develop rickets, and then we found out that, you know, you can have them lay in the sun and you basically stop that from happening. Now, a lot of bone problems are permanent, obviously, you know. So it's unfortunate that rickets is making sort of a comeback in our civilization now, but you can see why, due to these lifestyle aspects, you know, working hours, location, etc., etc. So it's important to understand, and to keep this in mind too. It's a huge, whatever that is, the A380 Airbus or whatever. So you're gonna have to excuse me for a second. But and my black people need to keep this, and darker and brown skinned people need to keep this in mind too, because it's harder for us to make vitamin D due to our skin color, our skin tone. The darker your skin, the more sunlight you need, or the more UVB you need. And it's important to keep that in mind, because there are a few things that affect directly your ability to make vitamin D, and that is the time of day, obviously your location on Earth, how far away from the equator you are, and the season. And all of this is because of the angle of the sun in the sky. The more shallower the angle, the more UVB rays don't reach you due to atmospheric and wavelength limitations, speed of that, basically your distance from the sun. If you go up in, you know, that angle gets farther away from you, the distance is greater. If it's 12 noon and you're at sea level, you go into the mountains, you're gonna make more vitamin D, if all else was equal. Vitamin D, you know, that also affects your, well, speaking of calcium status greatly affects your ability to control your blood pressure. And this is something that a lot of black people have a problem with. And part of that problem is obviously a result from other lifestyle things such as diet and exercise. And also part of that problem can be some genetic differences. I wouldn't call them weaknesses, but genetic differences on how we absorb and deal with sodium. So that just goes back to our lifestyle and how we eat. You know, in our culture, a lot of times we have certain things that would obviously increase our potential for sodium. Some people don't respond negatively to a lot of sodium, and again, there's various reasons why. And you get a lot of potassium from fruits and vegetables, and potassium counteracts some of those negative effects of sodium. So how many people actually get anywhere close to their recommended daily allowance of fruits and vegetables, other than vegetarians, some vegetarians and vegans? So it's important to keep that in mind, kind of as a side note there. But it's harder for us to make vitamin D, in other words. We test lower than most other people, and most people are 50%, depending on what you read, around 50% to a little bit more. I think I saw up to, you know, 3/4 of us We routinely test low for blood levels of vitamin D. And it's easy to understand why, based on these limitations and whatnot that I just talked about. So if you can't or don't want to get more midday sun between the hours of 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. when the sun is usually in its zenith, and you need to look, you need to talk to your doctor about supplementing. I got a little sidetracked there with the blood pressure thing, but obviously if it's early in the morning, late in the afternoon like it is right now, you're not going to make much vitamin D, if any at all. You don't really make any at all if it's generally accepted if your shadow is longer than you are tall. And if you go outside in most of America and most of America during midday, it will still be